little bit down the road, he said, pull over, pull over. So I pulled over and I thought, he said, we're going into that house over there. So we go into the house, we bang on the door, and these people open it. Obviously, they didn't know Duke, and they sure as hell didn't know me. And Duke walked in and he said, I'd like a drink.
It was Hollywood's biggest scandal. John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara's forbidden love. For decades, they denied the rumors. Now, their families are exposing everything.
He was perhaps he was my dearest friend and my best friend. Not as man and woman, but as two human beings. I knew all of his secrets and he knew all of mine. And to this day, his kids say to me, come on, Maureen, you know more about Dad than anybody else. Tell. And I said, They were secrets then, they're secrets now, and they'll always be secrets.
17 secret love poems, a hidden photo by his bed for 30 years, and the heartbreaking last words that changed everything. The real story behind that just friends claim will leave you speechless.
Two people who are movie stars from different generations. The younger, of course, is John Candy, and Moren O'Hara has made 56 motion pictures, including all-time classics like The Quiet Man and Miracle on 34th Street. And she actually retired from the business 20 years ago, but apparently John persuaded her to come back for one more time, and the picture is called Only the Lonely, which comes out the 24th and has received some marvelous reviews. Would you welcome John Candy and Moren O'Hara?
Maureen Fitzsimons, later known as Moren O'Hara, was born on August 17, 1920, in Ranelagh, a suburb of Dublin, Ireland. Her family was unique. Her mother, Margarita, was a famous singer with a beautiful contralto voice. Her father, Charles, ran a business and also owned part of the Shamrock Rovers, a famous Irish soccer team. Maureen was the second of 6 children, growing up with Peggy, Florrie, Charles, Margot, and James. Life in a big family shaped her personality. She was tough, playful, and loved sports. She didn't mind rough games, which later helped her perform dangerous stunts in Hollywood movies. As a child, Maureen had a big imagination. She would talk to the flowers in her garden and pretend to be one of them. She would imagine conversations between the flowers, creating little stories in her mind. Later in life, she told this to actor Charles Laughton, who thought it showed her natural talent for acting. At just 5 years old, she started acting by performing with her shadow. Even then, it was clear she loved being creative. When Maureen was 10, she joined the Rathmines Theatre Company, where she acted in amateur plays. She was also a student, managing school, and her love for acting at the same time. Soon, her talent grew, and she went to the Ina Mary Burke School of Elocution and Drama, where she learned how to act, speak, and perform with confidence. Maureen was very determined. She won many awards for drama and theater, proving her talent early. At just 14, she earned a place at the Abbey Theatre School, which was Ireland's most famous theatre. This was a big deal. The Abbey was where the best actors trained, and Maureen learned classical plays and operatic singing. She impressed everyone when she won the Dublin Fice Award for playing Portia in The Merchant of Venice. Her ability to bring deep, complex characters to life stood out. People started noticing her as a rising star. Maureen's journey to Hollywood began with a little luck. At 17, she went to London for a screen test. It didn't go well, and the studio wasn't impressed. But Charles Laughton, a famous actor and producer, saw something special. He said her eyes were hauntingly beautiful and couldn't stop thinking about her. Even though Maureen had no professional experience, Laughton believed in her. He signed her to a 7-year contract, which was an incredible opportunity for someone so young. Laughton gave her a big chance in Alfred Hitchcock's Jamaica Inn, 1939. She played Mary Yellen, the niece of Laughton's character. The movie was her first big role, and it taught her a lot about acting in front of the camera. After that, Laughton brought her to Hollywood, where she starred with him in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, 1939. This movie made her a star. At just 19 years old, Maureen played Esmeralda in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. It was a tough role, but she was determined to do her best. Filming took place during a very hot summer in California, and the physical demands were exhausting. She insisted on doing her own stunts, even in dangerous scenes like the one where her character was almost hanged. Maureen worked hard despite the heat and discomfort of heavy costumes. Her performance was powerful, and critics noticed her talent. The movie became a big success, earning $3 million at the box office. It showed everyone that Maureen could shine alongside legendary actors like Charles Laughton. Around this time, Maureen's name was changed to Moren O'Hara. Her mentors, Laughton and producer Eric Palmer, thought her real name, Maureen Fitzsimons, was too long and hard to remember. Inspired by Scarlett O'Hara from Gone with the Wind, they picked the name O'Hara to make her sound more Irish and easy to recognize. Maureen wasn't thrilled about the change at first, but she trusted their advice. Her new name appeared for the first time in Jamaica Inn, and it became part of her Hollywood identity. Moren O'Hara's big break came in 1941 with How Green Was My Valley, directed by John Ford. The role of Angharad wasn't even meant for her. It was originally for Katharine Hepburn, and the plan was to shoot in Wales. But when World War II forced the filming to move to California, Maureen got her chance. She was still new to Hollywood, yet she landed the role without even doing a full screen test. She beat big names like Hepburn and Gene Tierney. The film turned into a massive success, winning 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, even beating Citizen Kane. People still argue about that decision. For Maureen, it was a proud moment, but also bittersweet. She was the only main actor not nominated for an Oscar, and this kind of snub would happen again during her career. Her relationship with the director, John Ford, was complicated. One time, Ford punched her in the jaw for no clear reason. Instead of stepping back, Maureen stood her ground to show how tough she was. This moment set the tone for their working partnership, productive but full of tension. Despite this, the film's success changed her career. She got a new contract that let her work with different studios, including Fox. This opened doors for her to take on more roles and work with many famous directors. Maureen became known as the Queen of Technicolor because she looked stunning in the new color format. Her red hair and green eyes were so perfect for Technicolor that the man who invented it, Herbert Kalmus, used her as an example to show off how good the technology was. Filming in Technicolor was tough because of the bright lights, but Maureen handled it like a pro. While other actors needed breaks, she worked for 20 hours straight without complaining. Her first Technicolor movie was To the Shores of Tripoli in 1942, and it was a hit. After that, she starred in many colorful films like Buffalo Bill, The Spanish Main, and Sinbad the Sailor. Between 1941 and 1953, she acted in 19 Technicolor movies, more than any other actress. But being called the Queen of Technicolor wasn't always a good thing for her. Studios often focused on her looks instead of her talent. She once said producers would tell each other, "Put O'Hara in it. It doesn't matter what the story is, just drape her in green and light her with orange." Maureen didn't like being treated this way, so she worked hard to find roles that showed her acting skills, not just her beauty. One of her most loved roles was Doris Walker in Miracle on 34th Street in 1947. This movie almost didn't work because the studio released it in May, thinking people went to theaters more in warmer months. To avoid spoiling the surprise, they hid the fact that it was a Christmas movie in early promotions. Maureen didn't even want to do the movie at first because she thought the script was bad, but her co-star John Payne convinced her. In the end, her performance as a strong, no-nonsense woman became one of her most famous roles. Maureen also stood out in swashbuckling films. She was one of the few actresses who did her own stunts. In The Black Swan, she insisted on doing the sword fights herself. During one scene, she injured her hand but kept going, and that shot was used in the movie. She also learned skills like fencing, horseback riding, and even using a bullwhip for roles like the Spanish Main. She became so good with the bullwhip that she sometimes outshined her male co-stars. Her dedication to her work could also be dangerous. While filming Against All Flags in 1952, a stunt almost went horribly wrong. A sword came so close to her that she was nearly decapitated. Luckily, she only got a small scar on her hand. This showed how far she was willing to go to make her performances feel real. Moren O'Hara's courage and talent made her a true Hollywood legend. Moren O'Hara first met John Wayne in a very strange way. It was August 17, 1941, when she was called to meet director John Ford at his office. She was 21 years old and already gaining attention as an actress. When she arrived, she found herself standing with John Wayne, who was 34, and already a big Western movie star. Ford, known for his tough personality, looked at them and suddenly said, "Dance." O'Hara, confused but willing to follow instructions, began dancing an Irish jig. Wayne awkwardly tried to keep up. After a few moments, Ford shouted, "Cut!" and sent them both away without explaining why. Neither O'Hara nor Wayne knew this odd meeting was a chemistry test for future movies. Ford had noticed O'Hara's strong performance in How Green Was My Valley and thought she might be a great match for Wayne on screen. O'Hara later laughed about it, saying, "That John Wayne fellow seems nice enough, but what an odd way to meet someone." This strange moment would eventually lead to a long-lasting professional partnership and friendship. Their first movie together didn't happen until 1950 with Rio Grande. The road to this film was not simple. John Ford wanted to make a romantic comedy called The Quiet Man, but the studio didn't want to fund it. To get his way, Ford agreed to make Rio Grande first, knowing it would make money. The movie was filmed in the hot deserts of Moab, Utah, where temperatures went over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. O'Hara played Kathleen York, the wife of John Wayne's character, Lieutenant Colum Kirby York. The heat was exhausting, and the work was tough. In one dangerous scene, O'Hara had to ride a horse at full speed while wearing a heavy costume. On the third take, her horse stumbled, almost throwing her off. Wayne immediately stopped the filming and demanded a stunt double be used for the risky scenes. This protective gesture showed the start of a deep friendship between them. Despite the difficult filming, O'Hara and Wayne had amazing on-screen chemistry. Wayne later said, working with O'Hara felt like finding a sister. Rio Grande was a big hit, earning $2.25 million, and set the stage for their future collaborations. Even though O'Hara was paid $50,000 and Wayne made $100,000 plus extra profits, she always said Wayne treated her as an equal, which was rare for women in Hollywood at that time. In 1952, they reunited for The Quiet Man, which became their most famous film together. It was filmed in Ireland, and O'Hara faced many challenges during the 129-day shoot. In one tough scene, she had to run barefoot across a rocky field in the rain. She did it 38 times, and by the end, her feet were bleeding. But she didn't complain. Wayne was so impressed by her strength that he gave her a pair of lambskin-lined boots with a note saying, "To ward off the chill of an Irish summer, your pal, Duke." This thoughtful gift showed how much he respected her. The movie also included a famous 9-minute fight scene between Wayne and Victor McLaglen, which took 4 days to film. even though O'Hara wasn't in the scene, she stayed on set every day to support Wayne. The Quiet Man became a huge success, earning $3.8 million and winning 2 Academy Awards. The film made their partnership legendary and even boosted Irish tourism, bringing more visitors to Cong, where it was filmed. Critics loved their performances, and fans saw them as one of Hollywood's best on-screen duos. Because of their strong chemistry, rumors about a real-life romance between O'Hara and Wayne began to spread. These rumors grew stronger during the filming of McClintock in 1963. A photographer claimed to have caught them in an intimate moment behind a soundstage and sold the blurry pictures to a tabloid. The magazine ran a story suggesting they had been secretly in love for years. At the time, Wayne was divorcing his 3rd wife, and O'Hara was single, which only fueled the speculation. Both O'Hara and Wayne denied the rumors. O'Hara even held a press conference saying, "I have been happily married to my career for 24 years, and to suggest otherwise is false and damaging." Years later, O'Hara hinted at their connection when she said, "I loved Duke and he loved me, but we were never in love." This statement kept people guessing. O'Hara spent much of her life publicly denying any romantic involvement with Wayne. One of her most direct denials came in 1988 during an interview with Barbara Walters. Looking straight at the camera, O'Hara declared, "I have never had a romantic relationship with John Wayne. Our love was the deep love of true friendship." Despite her firm words, some still doubted her. Tabloids analyzed her body language, claiming she was hiding something. To silence the rumors, O'Hara took out a full-page ad in Variety, saying, "My friendship with John Wayne was one of the most beautiful and enduring relationships of my life. To suggest it was anything more than that is an insult to my late husband and our marriage." Maureen O'Hara's life had many struggles and moments of strength. Her first marriage happened when she was just 19. On June 29, 1939, George H. Brown surprised her with a wedding. She was about to board the Queen Mary to Hollywood for her film The Hunchback of Notre Dame. In shock and confused, she went through with it. She didn't even tell her family or her mentor, Charles Lawton, until later. The next day, while on the ship, she broke down and told them everything. They told her to keep it a secret and promised to handle it. She never saw Brown again after their wedding day. Because World War II started, it took over 2 years for the marriage to be legally annulled. It was finally over on September 15, 1941. This short and painful experience taught O'Hara to be more careful in relationships. It also showed how much Hollywood controlled its stars' personal lives, as her bosses were furious and worried it might harm her image. Her second marriage, to Will Price, began in 1941 but lasted 12 very difficult years. Price was an American filmmaker. O'Hara didn't really see the relationship as serious at first, but Price kept pushing for marriage. Their wedding was small and took place at his family's home in Mississippi. O'Hara only told her family minutes before the ceremony with a quick phone call. The marriage brought her one child, her daughter Bronwyn Bridget Price, who was born on June 30, 1944. But the happiness of having a daughter was clouded by terrible events. Just a week before Bronwyn was born, Price, in a drunken rage, hit O'Hara in the stomach after she asked him not to go out that night. This shocking act was only the beginning of the abuse she endured for years. Price's alcoholism controlled much of their life together. He drank heavily and often passed out, not just at home, but in brothels, where O'Hara would have to go and collect him. She lived in constant fear of his violent outbursts. She hid his guns and slept with a baseball bat next to her bed to feel safe. At one point, He even worked with a doctor to convince her she needed surgery for a fake illness. This cruel trick seemed like another way to control her. O'Hara felt trapped by her Catholic upbringing and the pressure to avoid scandal in Hollywood. Looking back, she deeply regretted staying with him for so long. She said it cost her years of peace and happiness. In 1953, O'Hara finally filed for divorce. It wasn't easy. She had to pay off $300,000 of Price's debts, a huge amount back then. Price even tried to get custody of their daughter, but he later dropped the case. Despite the divorce being a challenge, it marked a turning point in O'Hara's life. In the 1950s, divorce was still considered scandalous, especially for someone like O'Hara, who was Catholic and a big star. But she stayed strong and focused on her work. She starred in some of her best movies during this time, like The Quiet Man in 1952 and The Parent Trap in 1961. These roles often showed her as a strong, independent woman, something that audiences loved. Even with her busy career, O'Hara always made time for her daughter Bronwyn. She chose movies that allowed her to bring Bronwyn to the set or spend time together. During The Parent Trap, Bronwyn even appeared as an extra. O'Hara worked hard to give her daughter a normal life. In the 1960s, Bronwyn spent much of her time in school in Mexico, away from the Hollywood spotlight. O'Hara's caring nature wasn't just for her own daughter. She became close to Natalie Wood, her young co-star in Miracle on 34th Street. Natalie called her Mama Maureen, and O'Hara loved being like a mother to her. O'Hara often said she had played the mother of nearly 40 children in her movies, but Natalie always had a special place in her heart. This warmth and strength, both on and off screen, became a big part of O'Hara's legacy. In 1957, Maureen O'Hara found herself in a scandal. A magazine called Confidential wrote a shocking story about her. They claimed she was caught behaving inappropriately with a man in a theater. The story said this happened on November 9, 1954, at Grauman's Chinese Theater. According to the article, the theater manager saw her with her blouse unbuttoned, stretched across 3 seats. They even described the man with his coat off, looking messy, and said the scene was very improper. The magazine claimed they had proof from theater employees. This was especially bad for Maureen, because she had always been seen as a decent, respectable actress. But the truth was, the whole story was made up to sell magazines. Maureen didn't stay quiet. She decided to fight back. On July 9, 1957, she filed a lawsuit against Confidential, asking for $1 million. Later, she raised it to $5 million because the damage to her reputation was so big. Back then, most celebrities ignored these kinds of stories to avoid more attention. But Maureen wouldn't let it go. She proved the story was a lie by showing her passport. It had a stamp that showed she was in Spain filming a movie called Fire Over Africa, when the magazine claimed she was in the theater. Her lawsuit became part of a bigger case against the magazine. The trial was a big deal and lasted 15 days. Maureen stood strong and showed everyone she wasn't afraid to fight lies. In 1967, Maureen met Charles Blair, and her life changed. Charles was a famous pilot who had broken flying records, including a solo flight over the North Pole. Maureen had just ended a painful relationship and didn't want to meet anyone new. But her brother convinced her to meet Charles. When they met, they talked for hours and found they both loved adventure and shared a connection to Ireland. Charles was 58 and Maureen was 47. But they didn't care about the age difference. Charles soon proposed, even though Maureen had sworn she wouldn't marry again after 2 failed marriages. She said yes. They got married in 1968 on the island of St. Thomas. Maureen decided to step away from Hollywood and focus on her life with Charles. They lived in St. Croix, where Charles ran an airline called Antilles Airboats. Maureen helped him with the business, learning about airplanes and helping to make decisions. Even though she left acting, she returned for special roles, like one in Big Jake with John Wayne in 1971. She also became part of the local community, raising money for schools and hospitals. Their life together was full of love and adventure, but tragedy struck in 1978. Charles was flying a plane from St. Croix to St. Thomas when the engine failed. He tried to land the plane on water, but the sea was rough and the plane crashed. Charles and 3 passengers died, while 7 others survived. Maureen was heartbroken. She had found happiness with Charles, and losing him was devastating. But she stayed strong, honoring his memory by setting up a scholarship in his name to help young people learn to fly. Moren O'Hara and John Wayne shared a bond that was deep, complicated, and special. In her autobiography, "'Tis Herself," Maureen revealed surprising details about their friendship and work together. She explained how director John Ford used to create tension between them on purpose to get stronger performances. One time, during the filming of The Quiet Man on May 14, 1951, Ford insulted Maureen's Irish heritage so badly that she ran off the set crying. John didn't know this was all part of Ford's plan, so he comforted her. This led to one of the most emotional and passionate scenes in the film. Another moment came years later, on August 17, 1963, while they were filming McClintock. A horse stampede went out of control, and John saved Maureen's life. He grabbed her and pulled her out of danger just seconds before she could have been trampled. She even wrote down the exact time in her diary, 2:37 p.m. Maureen also admitted that she and John had a brief romantic moment during a party in 1947 after filming The Quiet Man. But they both agreed it was better to stay friends because their professional relationship mattered too much. Her stories showed how much they trusted and cared for each other, even beyond their roles in Hollywood. Their friendship lasted for decades and was built on respect and humor. On September 3, 1957, at the premiere of The Wings of Eagles, John told everyone, "She's the best guy I know." People were confused by this, but it showed how much he admired her. Maureen felt the same way. On May 21, 1979, during her testimony in Congress, she called John her dearest friend and said they had been close for 39 years. They didn't always agree, though. On July 12, 1965, they argued about politics for 3 days straight. But they always made up, often through humor. On John's 65th birthday, June 26, 1972, Maureen gave him a custom saddle with the words, "To Duke, the biggest pain in my ass I've ever known." John laughed so hard he couldn't stop for 5 minutes. He also respected her as an actress. In a 1976 Playboy interview, he said she was the only one who could out-cuss him on set. Maureen admired John, too, and said he taught her how to do her own stunts, something she kept doing throughout her career. When they worked on Big Jake in 1971, they trusted each other so much they made up 40% of their lines on the spot. Their final meeting was incredibly emotional. On June 8, 1979, Maureen flew from her home in St. Croix to Los Angeles when she heard John was very sick with cancer. She arrived at UCLA Medical Center at 10:43 a.m. and spent over 4 hours with him. Even though John was weak, he smiled and joked with her. They talked about their old films, laughed about memories, and even discussed a new movie idea, even though they both knew it wouldn't happen. When Maureen got up to leave, John looked at her and said, "That's a gorgeous coat. It looks beautiful on you." Those were his last words to her. Years later, in a 1999 interview, Maureen said this simple compliment meant so much because it showed how John always noticed little details about her. She also revealed that during this meeting, John admitted he had thought about ending his life because of the pain. But their time together gave him the strength to keep going, even if only for a few more days. When John died on June 11, 1979, Maureen was devastated. Her grandson, Connor, said it was the only time he had ever seen her cry so much, even more than when her husband died. She got the news at 5:35 p.m. and couldn't stop crying for hours. She insisted on writing John's eulogy herself, spending 3 days on it without stopping. At the funeral on June 15, 1979, she broke down 3 times while talking about their films. At the end of the service, she walked up to his casket and whispered something no one else could hear. In 2004, she said she had told John a private joke they had shared and promised to keep it a secret forever. After his death, Maureen watched The Quiet Man 57 times in 1 month and thought about quitting acting. On his birthday, May 26, 1980, she held a special dinner and unveiled a bronze statue of John, which she had paid $183,000 to create. Their families also shared touching stories about their bond. Patrick Wayne, John's son, said his father kept a framed photo of Maureen on his bedside table for 30 years, even through his marriages. The photo was from August 17, 1951, during the filming of The Quiet Man. Maureen's daughter, Bronwyn, remembered seeing her mother and John hugging on Christmas Eve in 1955. She was only 11, but she could tell their connection went deeper than friendship. John's grandson, Brendan, later revealed that between 1960 and 1962, John wrote 17 love poems to Maureen. One line said, "In your eyes, I see the Ireland I've never known, but always longed for." These poems have never been published, but will be displayed at the John Wayne Birthplace Museum starting May 26, 2026, which would have been John's 119th birthday. All of these stories show how much they meant to each other, both as friends and as people who shared something truly special. After 20 years away from acting, Moren O'Hara returned to the screen in 1991 with Only the Lonely. The movie was made just for her by Chris Columbus, who wrote and directed it. John Hughes produced the film, and Maureen played Rose Muldoon, the bossy Irish mother of John Candy's character. Columbus had loved Maureen's work for years and wanted her for this role. Critics loved her performance, especially how real her relationship with John Candy felt. The movie made $25.1 million, which was a decent success for that kind of story. In 2014, when Maureen was 94, she finally received an honorary Oscar. It was a big deal because, even though she had an amazing career, she had never been nominated for an Academy Award before. The ceremony took place in Hollywood, and Liam Neeson and Clint Eastwood gave her the award. They spoke about how much she meant to the world of movies. Maureen, in a wheelchair but still full of humor, joked, "I hope it's silver or gold, and not like a spoon from the kitchen." Everyone in the room loved her spirit. Maureen passed away on October 24, 2015, at her home in Boise. She was 95 years old and died peacefully, surrounded by family. At the time, she was listening to music from her favorite movie, The Quiet Man. Her death came less than a year after she finally received her Oscar. It was the perfect ending to a life filled with incredible achievements and unforgettable moments.